Welcome back to another episode of the Yoga Well podcast. I'm Chase Bossart. Today I have my good friend and colleague and student, Cindy Capwell here, who is a yoga therapist and a chanter extraordinaire, and who has really done a lot of extraordinary work in the mental health realm of things. Cindy, so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much, Chase. Thank you for having me.
So we've known each other almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
And a lot has happened in those 10 years.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, really, a lot has happened.
So I like to start with a brief introduction to how did you find yoga and how did you find Vini Yoga, and begin there.
I went to my very first yoga class in January of 2012. And it was my spouse, my husband, was training for a marathon, and his legs were just really stiff. I mean, he could barely reach his sneakers to get them on. And he said to me, "There's a stretch class for runners at the YMCA. Would you like to come with me?" And I'm like, "Sure, why not?" And I went, and it was a yoga class, and it just grabbed me. I had no idea what yoga was. I had never, of course, I had heard of it, but I didn't know what it was at all. And I was just immediately like, wow, this is great. I have no idea why I thought it was great. So I started going to every class they offered, every teacher they offered. I was getting on the internet, researching what is yoga. I learned about lineages and gurus, and there were documentaries out at the time. There was one on Mr Krishnamacharya. I think it was called Breath of Fire. And I just got in that
Breath
way.
of Gods.
Breath
Yes,
of God.
something like
Thank you. So I kind of chose a lineage. And I'm laughing because the criteria that I was using, in hindsight, it reminds me of like a senior in high school choosing a college because, the girls are wearing cool clothes or something really important like that.
Totally. I see myself there. I'm going there. Perfect.
Exactly. And so the criteria were so not appropriate, but I think I just felt they're very into physical strength of, Ashtanga. And I sought out a teacher and I went there and I did that. And I really did like it. I went to a 200-hour teacher training in Miami. And that is where I met you, but that isn't really where I came to Vini Yoga. I kind of came to Vini Yoga in heart before then, because I was speaking with one of my Ashtanga teachers, and I said to her, this physical practice is great for me, but where my heart is in terms of if I ever became a teacher, I would want to teach to the mentally ill and people living with mental wellness and mental illness issues. And she said, well, there is a lineage that's very close to ours called Vini Yoga. And these are some of the main well-known teachers in America who do that. And so I had gotten on the internet again, very research oriented, and learned about a lot of the teachers. And I also learned about you and your school, which was going by another name at the time. So I kind of just booked that in my memory. And then I went off to my 200-hour teacher training. And, it is really weird. Like last week, I was cleaning out my emails and I saw an email that I had written to one of the teachers in that 200-hour who had said, well, we're having a guest teacher next week to introduce us to chanting and the Bhagavad Gita. And his name is Chase Bossart. And I wrote this long email saying, oh, I saw this guy on the internet. He's super cool. I can't believe he's coming. I can't believe I'm going to get a chance to meet him. And the teacher did introduce you to me, and we did chat. And I came to you right after the training ended. I mean, my first contact with you was within a week or two after ending that training. And, I still think there was a little bit of a bifurcation in my head, like Ashtanga's for me and the Vini Yoga is for, the people with, I don't know what, maybe physical issues or mental issues or whatever, emotional issues. And I didn't yet understand, there was still a little avidya there, that Vinaya Yoga is for everybody. It is so broad and so deep, and it's for everybody. And it did take me a while to realize, hey, this is here for you too. So
Well, I
that was
remember
the first part of my journey.
the first conversation we had was in Miami Life Center, and you introduced yourself as a as a Ashtanga practitioner. In my mind, there was like, I'm strong and I can do this. And then we had a conversation a week later in which you asked for to be connected with a personal teacher, and part of your criteria was, I want a strong physical practice.
I remember that. I was very, very slow to give it up.
Yeah,
And
I remember that too.
but you're a very, very patient teacher. Very patient, or I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, so you
Yes,
connected with Adriana Hermel, I think, and that was
yes,
very fruitful for I don't know, a year or two.
yes. I stayed with her, and you gave me some books to read, and really, you gave me religiousness in yoga and the heart of yoga. I was very into reading and research. I'm not yet into the experience of yoga, just learning about yoga. But there was something there pulling me. There was something there internal that I wasn't even aware of because I didn't yet have any awareness of my internal systems, my subtle systems. I didn't know that they were there. I was all about the physical. And there were yearnings there. There was some yearning, some feeling, some knowing that yoga offers something more than a physical practice. And for whatever reason, that yearning wasn't being met in the current environment in which I was at that time. I knew that there were some things inside of me that needed some digestion and release. And I remember saying to you, I need the physical practice because I need the strength to be able to do what's coming. And I was talking about that, the digestion and release of some things that had happened to me earlier in my childhood and adolescence. And I remember you saying to me very gently, it's going to take a different kind of strength. And you didn't push it or preach or anything. You just kind of planted that seed. And it did, I'm sure what I anticipate you hoped it would do. It got me thinking, well, what the heck does he mean? What kind of strength is there
Physical
and
strength. Yeah.
besides physical? Um, and so we went from there. I also signed up for one of your chanting classes. And you at that time you were teaching in a small group format, the chanting the Yoga Sutras. So I did that. And I think you were also teaching a Yoga Sutra philosophy class. And I think I signed up for that. And I was working with Adriana. So really, even as we're talking about it, I realized I kind of dove in pretty deep from the beginning, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I kind of got wraparound exposure from the very beginning, and that is really it created an environment that helped me really begin the journey in earnest, the journey inward.
I think that this is a really, really important point, that the physical practice is supported so strongly by having a sense of the context in which it is operating. And I think this is one of the biggest things that's missing in Western yoga, is a clear understanding of the goals and focuses and what the practice is about. I mean, there's lots of people who go to practice, who go to yoga classes in all the different forms, and they feel really different, and they see things are changing in their life, and they know that yoga has a key role in this, but they don't have the philosophical foundations that help them get oriented in that. And I think that one of the most powerful thing for practitioners is to have this study.
I have described the way you teach as surround sound.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the Yoga Well Institute is set up as a thing that provides a lot of contact points. The contact points allow over time for massive transformation, but it's not overnight, and it's not all the contact points are, I think, extremely helpful. It's much slower to only do personal practice or to only do Yoga Sutras class, or only have the Wednesday morning meditations, etc. But to have your own personal practice and every week be led in a meditation, and every week also sit in on a philosophy class or do a training or something like that, it definitely holds the situation. And that is really part of what we're about. And it's a conscious foundation for how we set up our trainings and our classes and that kind of thing.
Yes, I mean, that was certainly my experience. And, you know, um, all the contact points are very interconnected. When you're just starting your journey, you don't see that. You don't see, well, what's the relationship between chanting and the Yoga Sutras and the meditation? They seem like discrete activities that all somehow fall under the umbrella of yoga. But, as you move further down the path, there is an integration there, even of all the different contact points and the tools, because the context is very broad and that becomes known to the student. But I want to go back to something you said about how in the West, often the initial point of contact is the asana, like the yoga studio or the yoga online class or whatever. And yes, that's very, very true. And I take it even a step further, Chase. As you know, I recently moved to a new city. And so I am not as known here as a yogi as I was in my old city. So I've had to venture out for the first time in probably 5, 6, 7 years, since before COVID, to yoga studios to attend classes and learn what the different offerings are and to see the other teachers. And, I think one thing that strikes me is that it is an entry point. And one thing that we learn in Vini Yoga is that even at the very beginning, we offer practices that answer the problem that the student is asking to be solved. And at the same time, we lay the foundation for further development,
Yes.
so that the door is open if the student wants to continue down that after the emergency or the pain is over. And so what I mean by that is, because we view the endpoint of yoga as meditation, that we work immediately on the quality of attention, even when it's a very, very healing oriented asana breath practice. And that was really, I was really reminded of that when I started going to the studios, sometimes they'll say, keep breathing or breathe slowly or pay attention to your breath. And that's not bad or wrong. But the way you connect those things, the way we do it in Vini Yoga, is oriented towards developing a quality of attention, which later is the ultimate support for the inner transformation that we are working towards with our students.
Yes, I completely agree. It's such a nice point. If you go to an asana class and the person is saying something like, well, keep breathing, or don't forget to breathe, or etc. Or, sometimes they'll give very detailed physical instructions, and then they'll be like, inhale. And then they give the very next set of detailed instructions, they say, exhale. And this is disjointed.
It's the opposite of how we do it. We start with the breath instructions. Those are the instructions that we give that are highly detailed. And then we'll say, lift your arm. We don't really even almost ever say in what direction, unless the student needs a support lifting the arm. And so we're very much, the breath is the foundation and the asana is there to support the breath. And that was really something I always knew, but I was very, very reminded of it, have been recently as I've gone to these studios. Another way, I recently someone was asking me, am I qualified to teach meditation? And I was describing, what I do and how I do it. And I have had the observation, particularly with the very new students, mostly one-on-one, you give them a very short practice and you ask them, how do you feel? And they don't even realize what they're saying. But so often they'll say, I just feel more alert. I feel more relaxed and more alert. And that combination seems like a surprising combination. Based on Patanjali, they should be highly connected. And, often people's experiences are that they are. So, my point is, because of the way we teach the breath, the way we teach, period, the rubric of teaching breath and asana, or whatever it is we're teaching, is oriented towards lowering the distractions and increasing the quality of attention from the get-go. And that is early preparation for a sitting practice down the road.
Super. So it's such a nice point. So then you decided to take a step forward and do the therapist training, our big 1,000-hour, 4-year-long program. You were in Charlotte and you had to travel to Nashville, etc. How'd you make that decision?
Oh, well, before that, you had started another training up in Minneapolis, which I kind of went to the info sessions for. But I had, at that time, it was too soon after the 200-hour teacher training. I felt tired. I didn't feel ready, but I kind of put it in my back pocket. So by the time a year or two later went and you started the Nashville training, I was very ready for it. I wanted to do it. I was afraid. I think I remember telling you I wanted the information. I just felt very drawn to and wanted the information, but I didn't have any idea what I was going to use it for. And by the way, I was going to just be doing the yoga, not the therapy. I can't believe I ever said that to you, but that's where I was, avidya, yet still. And so I signed up for the training, and it was really amazing. It was such an amazing, amazing experience. Just being completely immersed by that, being in a cohort, watching other people go through their process. It really felt like a village, the other faculty members were just so sharp, and you used to invite everybody's mentors to come on, and sometimes graduates of prior trainings to come on. And I remember very often looking around the Zoom room, just having a feeling like, wow, this is really a village raising a new crop. And it was just such a level of support that I've never felt before. It was really unique and very, very special.
This again, what we were talking about is the surround sound yoga
Yes.
teaching. The therapist training is set up as everyone it's considered, I consider it a container, and yoga to be an experiential teaching. If you're going to be a yoga therapist, I expect everybody to go through the process themselves. And that's how we know where the shoe pinches, and that's how we know what is effective for us and how things work for us and all of those things. And so everybody has an individual mentor, and they're required to meet with that person essentially once a month for the whole 4 years. They're supposed to develop a personal practice out of that, which they do daily, and they're required to have a journal entry after something like 750 practices, something like that they turn in. Not that we actually read the journals, but that we see that they're done. And then there's Wednesday mornings. There's a lead practice online, half an hour. And then there's several times a month on Monday nights for a couple hours. And then there's these in-person modules that happen 4 times a year where we get together for 4 or 5 days. The whole time there's a touch point. There's your personal practice. Then once a week, it's a touch point with me as the teacher of the meditation. And then a couple times a month, there's a touch point of the cohort as a whole, and someone leading informational instruction. And then we get together these several times every year. And the point is really to put each person into the fire of changing your state, developing attention, becoming aware of what's happening in yourself and how that reflects in your everyday life, and what structures are there that work for you and what structures are there that don't work for you. And I feel it's a complete privilege to be part of that and to see how everybody works with that. This is another part about the village thing. It's like, it's so useful to have your peers sharing. It's so often that you get into a place, you feel like nothing's happening for you, or you're stuck, and it's so useful to have one of your peers sharing, like, well, here's what's going on for me, and here's what's happening for me.
It's useful in so many ways. I mean, it's on the one hand, you realize that while your journey and your crises or whatever it is are personal to you, the other person's having their own journey, and it's kind of same but different. On the one hand, I think that we discovered that there is a structure to how one moves from a distracted mind and an imbalanced system over to a quiet mind and a balanced system. And there are some universalities to how that process operates. And I think, Patanjali really runs through them in great detail, and creates a great roadmap for what the process is. And at the same time, it's a personal universe. The particulars of each person's journey are very unique. And so it's kind of interesting to see same but different. On the one hand, you realize we're all in the same boat. And on the other hand, you realize, and my particulars are a little bit unique. And that, again, creates some context for what's happening for us while we're on this journey. You often said along the way that, embarking on your own journey in earnest is going to be the best preparation for teaching down the road. And it really is. And while the thing that worked on me might not be the exact thing that works on a student who's sitting before me, we have to test because everybody's different. We know what the structure of the path is. So we know the guideposts, we know the turns in the road, and we can help keep our students going on their path, on their journey. The supports are specific to them that we offer. That's what you see when you have a community of cohorts going through it with you.
One of the things about the program that I also really think is awesome is the functional group requirement. So each student is required to create a functional group and to go into the community, do outreach in the community, find another organization that works with the set population, and offer a yoga therapy class for that population. You did really interesting stuff in the mental health. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I did, yeah. I have a special interest in working with adults living with mental health or mental illness. I'll give you my personal definitions. They're only correct for me. Mental health, I generally think of a mental health or a mental wellness issue as, someone who's going through a difficulty currently in their life, or there's been a past difficulty that hasn't been fully digested and released. And the tools of yoga can address these things very effectively. Mental illness, for me, I kind of reserve for those kinds of things where a Western diagnosis would point to some kind of organic process to the brain, like psychosis or manic depression, bipolar disorder, where there's things going on that are hormonal or neurological that, while we can help someone in that sense, we can improve their relationship with what's happening to them, and we can give them some tools to help make them manage it well. We can't solve that problem for them. We can't cure that. That's not the goal. The way we might be able to move someone's back from very strained to very healthy and strong. So there's a little bit of a distinction there. But yes, I just think that it's very endemic, and I think that we all are touched by it, either personally or we know someone, and we're all kind of in it. We're either in it with our own experience or with a family member who we need to support, or a friend or a coworker, or even a community member. And so I just have an interest in supporting everyone who's touched by it, which is basically everybody.
So where did you do your group? Give me the process
Okay,
of
so
how
what
that
I did for
unfolded.
my, trying to remember my functional group. I think I did, oh, I know, it was during COVID. So I did yoga for stress and anxiety. And I was working at the time, I was volunteering through an organization called Mental Health America. It's a national organization. They have local chapters all over the country. And I developed a good friendship there with someone who worked there who was pretty high up in the organization. And she, was a practicing yogi. She's not a yoga therapist, and she wasn't even a trained yoga teacher at the time, just a longtime practitioner and a real believer in it. So she offered me a lot of opportunities, and through their Mental Health America platform, I offered um, a group, a functional group on yoga and anxiety during COVID, and it was very interesting. It was very successful. There were definitely a couple of people who asked to, keep going on an individual basis when it was over, and it was a very positive experience. It was an entryway for me. I went deeper into that afterwards, where the organization started asking me to go into some of the community programs that they service and deliver some yoga experiences there. And I did have a chance to go to one called Psychosocial Rehab Services. The name isn't important, but what it was a Medicaid funded day program for adults living with mental health, mental illness issues, and other really pretty big life challenges. So I went in there and did really what was intended to be a one-off. And I just really connected with the space and the people. I just felt something there. And they felt it for me at the end. They just clapped and said, please come back. And the clinical director did invite me to come back. So this was great for me. It was a golden opportunity because here I had adults who were, had really chronic situations going on, and they're in the program for a long period of time. So I was able to go every week for a couple of years, and there was very little turnover in who I was teaching to. So the first thing I want to say about working with the mental health population is that is really hard to find. In general, they can be a population of people who are isolated, who don't have means, who don't have access to a car to drive to a yoga studio. And oftentimes they're not as organized as some other people, so they don't keep a calendar. Maybe they don't have a phone, or they do, but they don't know how to use their calendar. And so there are real obstacles there. And for someone who wants to work with that group, the first big challenge is finding where they are and being willing to go where they are, because that bridge needs to be crossed by the yoga teacher and not the client. So I did group classes there for a long time, and it was quite a range. And I think I talked to you about it. And in the beginning, it was new to me too. So I was trying a bunch of different things to see what would land. And as I got to know the students better, the clients better, see how they responded to different tools, I began to feel less and less equipped to teach them as a group, because they became, as I knew them better, they became so diverse to me and so unique. And I could see that what one needed was very different from what the other needed. I had some who were very, very interested in the chanting. We would do a little breathing and a little gentle moving, and I would just chant and offer an English bhavana that would go with the chant, and they would just feel so refreshed. And then I had these Muslim men walking out of the room the minute I opened my mouth. And I asked them, like, do you mind sharing with me? And they said, well, my imam says that I can do the postures, but not the chanting. And that's very, very common for Christians and Muslims to be instructed that way. And you have to respect that. And so here I am thinking, these guys were young. They were like in their 30s and they were physically healthy. So I'm like, they need the Ashtanga. They've got the religious connection with their imam. They need a physical practice. But yet I've got this one over here in a wheelchair who's just really connected to the chanting. And it became so difficult that I went in and I asked the clinical director, can we switch the format to a clinic? Just find out if anyone wants to come and see me one-on-one. I'll come once a week and do a 1-hour class for everybody. On the other day, we'll run a clinic. We'll have a running sheet. I'll just go down the list until time is up. Next week, I'll start with the next name and we'll just rotate through. Nobody went to the classes anymore. Everyone signed up for the clinic.
That's so classic. I love that. And, you know, I think that this is structurally one of the most unfortunate parts about yoga as it's available in the West is that group classes are given as the sort of low skilled, low denomination, common denominator. And I think that it's does a real disservice, and you get a whole bunch of people who they don't know what they're getting into. And the more that they learn and the more that they know, the more they see that, oh my God, my group classes are very diverse and people need such different things. And how the heck am I supposed to teach this thing? And it's funny that that's the entry point for yoga, for most people in yoga in the West. But keep going. So everybody came to the clinic.
Yes. And then I heard all kinds of things behind closed doors that I hadn't heard in the group in, a couple of years at that point. And it just, it was just so interesting because, first of all, I would say when we're looking at at the heart of yoga and we're looking at, the spiritual side of yoga or the attentional qualities of yoga, it really it's the same whether you have a mental health issue or not. There are some things that are the same, and there are some differences, but it started feeling to me very much the same as working with a client who was a high functioning executive who was coming to me for stress relief or whatever. Like, the yearnings are the same. The yearnings are to feel loved, to be seen, to feel empowered, to have some direction, to feel connected to something in the heart space. I mean, yoga brings us to the very human experience. And when I started working with them one-on-one, I was able to go there. And there was just as varied with that population as it is with the population of people who just call us up off our websites or through referrals, word of mouth kind of a thing. And I do want to say there was a young man with schizophrenia once that I was working with who had just come out of a hospital experience where he had been put in an emergency room for a medical evaluation and he had become agitated. And a very standard procedure at that time is to give a shot in the arm of Haldol, which is a very, very strong antibiotic, and then put in a quiet room. And the person said to me, even in my most disorganized moments, meaning most psychotic moments, I was aware of who had compassion for me and was remembering that there was a human being under there wanting to be seen and heard, wanting to get well, and who was just treating me like some animal that was bothersome to the order of the things. And that really sat in my heart. And it taught me that the capacities, particularly, and this might be surprising, the capacities for someone working through a very, very serious and chronic mental health or mental illness issue to delve deep into the subtle dimensions of, what we would call Anandamaya, the heart space, where we feel connected to something that's bigger than us, that offers us a meaning that goes beyond our current difficulties. Often people in that population go there because it's all they have. And so while the capacity for attention might not have been refined as someone who's gone through Yoga Well Institute for several years, the yearning to go there was very palpable. I was taking Patanjali's advice: start with Ishvara Pranidhana and see if that lands. And don't bother with the other stuff if you can get there. And a lot of times I would. I had one example's coming to mind, a gentleman who his body and brain had been completely mangled in gun violence, and half his body was paralyzed, and I think his cognition was still intact, but he couldn't speak. He could, I don't know how he could communicate with me. A big concept in 3 words. He would think and utter a word, think and utter another word, but he somehow had to find a way to pick the words because he couldn't speak that easily. He had had a near-death experience, and he told me that when he came back from death, he was just shrouded in white light, and the white light was clearly God for him, and that the coming back was the gift, and the being here was the gift, and that every day, the minute he woke up, the first thing that would flood him is this white light of love. You know, who would have thought? It was so moving to me. It was so moving to me. So, you know, we immediately, that's all we talked about. We didn't, you know, I did do some breath work with him. But I didn't focus on his physical structure. It was very mangled and very incapacitated. Yeah, I did a little things with him, but it was really breathing. We did a little bit of nyasa with the arm that would work, and he liked that. But mostly I was there to support his connection with God as he had experienced it through this horrible gun violence experience. Yeah.
That's amazing. Quite a story. What do you do now?
Well, now I mostly see students one-to-one online, and I have all range of things. I have, you know, some students who are coming with physical pains. I have some adults living busy lives who are asking for some support getting through their busy lives. I have some people who are, you know, in their senior years who are quieting down and seeking some stronger connection with their spiritual path. I'm also mentoring the groups of people. What categories would they fall in? Yoga therapist in training, already certified yoga therapist, looking for some professional guidance as well as personal practice guidance. I'm guiding a yoga teacher who is interested in deepening her yoga practice, who is not really connected to the Vinaya yoga world at all. I'm also a Vedic chanter, and so I'm a chanting teacher, and I do teach chanting one-to-one online. That's it. That's the teaching. I'm still doing surround sound, Chase. I do my personal practice every day. I meet with you on Thursday nights for philosophy class. My practice is guided. And so I'm still doing some level of surround sound. It's not as intense as it used to be, but I need that. And I don't strive to graduate from needing that. It's always there. Maybe the form of it changes or how much of my time it takes up, but I anticipate I'll always benefit from that.
Are you, I know you've just moved, you mentioned that you've moved to a new city, etc. Are you looking to work with the mental health and mental illness population in your new town?
Yes. And I do have one inroads here. And it's the same program, the separate location. And so I live now in Asheville, North Carolina, and there is a psychosocial rehab program here, and I have taught there before quite a bit. They're in the process of moving their facilities, so they're a little bit disorganized right now. But when I spoke to the guy who's running it, he and I made a plan to connect in the first quarter of this year so that I can reintegrate back into their program. And I am going to explore other avenues, other places where I can find that population and have a steady access point for them that's manageable for them. It doesn't ask of them things that they can't offer.
Your description of it's the same but different is, I think, so useful to remember. In our trainings, we really are working on understanding what is yoga and how does yoga understand the human system and what are the yoga models and whatnot for that. And then we apply that in various, lots of different spaces. But I think one of the things that is commonly misunderstood by students and Western medical practitioners, they're like, okay, so, how does yoga work with XYZ diagnosis? Or how does yoga work with this category of disease, etc.? And, Mr. Desikachar was always so clear. He would say, well, let me see the person. Let me interact with the person. And that is such an interesting model for medical intervention. It's not that we don't have general things that we do for a specific population or a specific, quote, illness, etc. But it's that we have an understanding of how the human system functions, or, understandings. And then we look to see what is it that is the person's capabilities and what is getting in the way of their functioning. And then we start there, moving towards what we would say is a more ideal functioning. And so here you are with a person who has had a terrible trauma and who's physically having a lot of difficulties, but who on another level, as you're labeling the Anandamaya, has such amazing and beautiful, full relationship, contact, etc., with higher power. That gives us just almost an infinite number of ways to approach and to help someone. And I think that is really not understood by an outsider who doesn't understand our structure. They go, well, how is yoga going to work? Or how is yoga going to fix, etc.? It's like, well, we start out with the idea that you are a spiritual being operating within a human container. And that human container works in these ways. So where do we start? What's going on? And where do we go? And it's very difficult to convey how that works to someone who has not had the personal experiences themselves, and who does not have a fairly in-depth understanding of the way of yoga's understanding of the human system.
Boy, do I agree with that. I mean, there's so many differences. Personally, particularly for me in the area of mental health, when we think about the mind and the qualities of the mind and the dimensions of the mind, for me, and maybe it's just because it's the one I like, the model that we use in the yoga therapy, the Panchamaya model, it has so many more dimensions and nuances to it that are integrated into each other. And to me, it makes it easier to find a targeted intervention that will be a great starting point. And and we look very holistically. While it is true that doing an asana practice, particularly if it's accompanied with a breath practice, will impact all the dimensions of the being, it's also true that some tools will there are subtle tools that will hit the subtle dimensions in a much more targeted, focused way. So yes, if we do a good asana practice, good not necessarily meaning difficult, I would say appropriate, you are going to feel better all over. And for transformation to occur in the subtle inner domains, we really need to move into those subtle tools. And I think this is the part where we view the human system as going from gross to subtle and from subtle out to gross. That part of it is like, I don't have a lot of experiences with the Western medicine where I have a doctor who's looking at all of those dimensions. If it's a bone doctor, she's only looking at my bones and she's not looking inward towards my prana or my my knowing about my problem with my bones or the strength of my connection with I'm something more than my set of bones. And this is because we do the cross-sectional work all the time with every student, despite which thing is most pronounced. It's a much more integrated and holistic approach. And I think I'm very biased. You can yield a much more significant and lasting impact.
I will say you're much more experienced. The piece that is really, I think, important is the experiences, because the proof is really in the pudding. Sometimes it's hard to imagine what can be accomplished without, if we're just operating from a different medical system.
Totally. Yeah. And I think the best way to combat a lack of understanding in the medical profession or anywhere about what we do is to just do it and let people have the experience or see the experience of others, because it is in the experience where the understanding will come of all that's being offered. Yes.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect place to stop. Thank you, Cindy, for joining me today. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, I'm in the process of building a new website, and it's called yogaalambana.com. And it's already up and there's a placeholder there. So if you go there, there will be a place to send me an email, even though you won't see like an about or offerings and all that stuff. That's coming. And I don't know from the time this is being recorded to when it will air. I don't know how quickly it's going to go up, but you can reach me there. So yoga and then Alambana, ALAM like mother, BAN like Nathan, .com. Yeah.
Super. Well, I love the work that you do. So happy you're out doing it. Thank you. And we'll talk again soon. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you so much.